Email is important. If you think about it, email is there's something beautiful about it that no other platform has replicated, like communication platform has replicated so far. Everybody can open a network, can open a server, everybody can send email, and everybody has an email account, at least in the Occidental world. So there is, and it's owned by no one. So that's kind of a collective common that needs to be maintained and needs to be, recognized.
Nicolas Topel, thank you for joining me on the Mail Channels podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you about your entrepreneurial journey with your startup CritSend and more recently with Inbox Booster. But to get started, I wonder if you could talk about your experience at university at the CNAM school in France and how that influenced your entrepreneurial journey.
So it's in France. It's CNAM, as we say. It's a
CNAM.
very unusual school because it's the one that's open to all, and it's only night classes, and you can go all the way to PhD. So it's basically open only to people who work. Because I had to work after high school, so I did that. I did night classes there, and I got my master. Technically in 3 years, except the thesis, but I did one from graduation to master in 3 years because you can because you can take as many classes as you want. And I kind of realized that in theory it takes you 10 years. You're not supposed to, but a lot of the classes do factor with each other. Because if you understand network in at bachelor level, then you probably, if you understand network at master level, then you kind of understand them at bachelor level. So you could factor the classes like that. And that was kind of an unusual way of doing that, but that worked really well. And because I had like really good grades and all that. And that's where I've learned that you should not do what everybody's telling you to do. And there is a line between what people really expect and what people actually want you to do and what's actually being rewarded. In France, we have this idea that everything is based on talent, and it's based on how gifted you are at birth, which is a very aristocratic idea if you think about it. And here is literally about hard work because it's not very hard. But school starts at 6, finishes at 10 p.m. So because you're supposed to work again. So who wants to be when it's cold in February, when it's dark, even it's not as cold or as dark as in Canada, but it's still pretty bad.
You'd be surprised. It might be.
So a lot of it is about work ethic. And that's kind of the interesting bit that I've learned there.
One of the things you mentioned on your LinkedIn profile is that you started your first company, CritSend, while you were working on your master's thesis. So you actually paused your master's program to go and do the startup. So tell me, what caused you to pause your work on your thesis to go and start this company?
So initially, I was supposed to do my master. So in France, so in this school, you're supposed to go work on a research subject for a year in a company and kind of write up a summary about what you learned, what scientific problem you fixed, and so on. And when you're not, and it was really, really hard for me to find because people wanted. It was easy to find companies who wanted me as a cheap worker. But because I didn't come from the right background, I couldn't find a company who would want me to work on a scientific problem. So I could either do it for free in university, which I couldn't afford, or I could or I had to kind of find ways. And most people, what they do is they find a way to do it. Working on the side in their companies or working for free, roughly, which again I couldn't afford. So I was like, okay, let's. So I went to Germany, in Austria actually, to build to try to do that, but it kind of backfired. I mean, I got laid off just before Christmas, and so I was supposed to write it there, but they didn't give me time actually to write it. So and I was and this was a startup, so it's definitely the bad setup for that because that's not what you can do at startup. So I was like, oh, okay, then I'll just create my company. It would be kind of the same thing. So at least, so that's why I started, and then the company took off,
Wow.
and I didn't have time to write it, and just before leaving the company and selling it, or during the transition period, I kind of completed the master, the thesis, and then I kind of applied for it, and I got it.
That's amazing. So you went back and finished your master's degree, which is like a very unusual, it's a very uncommon story in Silicon Valley. You're supposed to quit school and never go back. Maybe get an honorary degree one day, but certainly not go back and actually finish your degree.
Yeah, but it's really writing 50 pages and making a presentation. So it's not like I had to go to school for 6 months. I did that because I just want to let like the time I just wanted to complete things because it was the right time. And I did that, but then I didn't. But in hindsight, I'm happy to have done it. Not because I've learned things on the way.
So CritSend, what was the idea behind CritSend? What was the company created to do? What was the problem you were solving?
So first of all, we were created in 26. So that's old, almost 20 years old.
Wow.
And at that time, you could see that AWS was starting off,
Yeah.
and it was going to be big. But all emails, I knew that all emails were built on IP at that time. Like all email reputation was built on IP, and cloud is dynamic. With cloud, there is I mean, having cloud forces you to have dynamic IP because you cannot really you don't have static IP, so everything was dynamic. So a consequence like the cloud growing means a lot of dynamic IP, which means that all those people sending emails, and at that time it was really important, they had to use an SMTP relay. And there were SMTP relay that you know about, but they were not made for that at that time. They were not made for mass mailing. They were made for I'm traveling and my ISP is blocking my 25 ports. So how can I work around? Or you had marketing companies for sending newsletters or a lot of marketing emails. So you didn't have that capacity, and it's really, really hard to build because you also had this idea that ESPs like Outlook, which was big at that time, wanted you to was delegating you to the reputation to you, and you're supposed to send good emails to pass the first filter. But if you were just starting out, it was impossible, and you had this cloud company, then cloud was becoming huge, and it was before it was obvious that it would be huge. But I remember in Australia when I was working there, it was an enterprise software, and they were like, "Oh yeah, but nobody's going to use the cloud because why companies would do that?" And in France we had a cheap hoster called OVH, and which you probably heard about, and it was exactly the same thing. Like, yeah, who would like to use? Why would I pay $10? Why would I pay $10 my server? Well, I could pay 1,000. And the pitch was they would do more, but because it was in a proper data center and all that, but in practice, every companies had an OVH server where they were running critical workload. It was kind
Right.
of a shadow IT thing because it was too cheap that, and it was easy because you clicked on the button. So I was like, yeah, it's going to be exactly the same. Plus it's AWS. So it's Amazon. So they know what they're doing. So, I'm not going to be able to compete with them because it was just me and nobody wanted to work with me at that time. So email was kind of a good deal. And in my previous as an employee, I was employed in an email marketing company, so I knew a little bit how that worked. And interestingly, my one of my network professor actually was the guy who wrote the AOL spam filter of that time. So
No way.
so yeah, that's just totally random. So, but he explained me how that worked, and I was like, oh, okay. Then, so because so my point being that I had the skills, and this was obvious at that time. It was obvious that the cloud would get big. The important people or the powers that be didn't take that seriously, but it was growing. So, and that's kind of one thing I've learned is you need to, if people are saying something, but the world is doing something else, then you should believe the world and not what the people are saying. So, and so you got that, and that's how I got in. And I was like, oh, okay. Then if I position like that, I should just wait, and I'll move from poor to okay.
So
So,
So CritSend, was it a sending platform? Like, did you make a email sending service
Yeah,
or?
yeah, we're an
Yeah,
SMTP relay
got it.
basically. We're
Okay.
an
Yeah.
SMTP relay. We started with an API, then we built an SMTP gateway, and yeah, sorry, and that was important because we had like so we had dedicated, we had static IPs. So
Mm,
cloud companies could, not cloud companies like AWS, but customers of these cloud companies could
yeah.
use us directly to send their email instead of not sending emails. And again, at that time, it was, we were one of the first on the market. It was very important. And they had, email was very, very important. Couldn't go without it. And they had no other options. So,
You know what's really
so
interesting? Before we recorded the podcast and I was researching you, I actually found an old email from you back in 2009 because mail channels had at that time we were looking at maybe building an email sending API for AWS customers, and we put out a form in the AWS developer forum, and you were one of the people who submitted the form, or someone else named Nicolas Topin.
no, it's me. No, it's me. It's me because
Yeah,
I knew, yeah, it's me because
yeah,
I knew your company also. It's because I was active at that time, very active in marketing
yeah.
in that time and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Even back then, well, we didn't know what we had in our hands, right? I think we put the form out, and within 24 hours, we had 300 inquiries from AWS customers. And I was flipping through those inquiries a few days ago, and there's some big name SaaS companies in there that were looking, but back then they were literally startups. They were just getting going. They had like a couple employees, and now they're huge, huge SaaS companies. And they had inquired about an email sending API. Very interesting that you went off in the direction of creating an email sending API, and we went in another direction, eventually realizing that we should create an email sending service for the web hosting industry, a completely
Yeah.
unique situation.
Which is one thing we
Yeah,
investigated also at
right.
Prison, and the
Yeah.
reason we didn't do it is because you were there. So
Oh, really? No kidding. Yeah, I thought maybe you didn't do it because it's scary.
no, it's not.
The
No, so
spam
the problem
problem
when
is
you
so scary.
the thing when you have an SMTP relay is
Yeah.
a third. So basically, a third of your cost is roughly servers. We managed to get them very under control, and we're paranoid about that. Another third of your cost is like marketing or ops and all that. But another third of it is really security. You
Yes.
really have people trying to abuse your system all
All
the
the
time.
time.
So you need to develop skills here. And you have two types of abuse. You have actual abuse, like people
Yeah.
sending a phishing email,
Yeah.
and they're paying you with the credit card they collected, so it's not
Yeah.
even. And you also have very sketchy customers. So you need to kind of manage these two, and sketchy practices too. So the choice we made at Critson, I made was to, because again I don't have any money and I don't have any capital, and in France the VCs. They were either insulting or despising. I don't know how to explain, but they didn't really took me seriously.
Yeah.
I kind
Yeah.
of like it didn't. I mean, it was very hard to find capital, but like yeah, let's just grow the business and have a very profitable business,
Yeah.
and that's it. So that was basically the thing, and it was fine as a business. It's created a lot of other problems that were in front, but it was fine as a business. So we really took. Contrary to, for instance, Hungary, they really tried to grow as fast as possible. They came here 2 years after us
Yeah. Yeah.
with the same ideas and
Yeah.
again the same diagnosis that cloud would be big and all that. But we took we kind of carved out the profitable segment of the market that Postmark has now, I guess, in that
Yeah.
space.
Right.
So we were just really doing transactional emails, a little bit of marketing, but not too much. And if you were doing worse stuff with non-opt-in stuff, we're not doing. So that was kind of very easy to manage our workload because of. But that means that you want to be ahead, and that's really good to be ahead. And you need to have a thesis as to why it will become it. But those small companies that you mentioned, yeah, I knew they were going to be small. I mean, sorry, I knew they were small and they were going to be big. I don't know which ones. But it was kind of obvious that they were, which kind of led me to the other thing that I should have invested in them. But
Yeah,
but I didn't
right.
have the money. But some, it was obvious that they were
Yeah.
going to become huge. It was kind of obvious. You could see it, and just with the email traffic, for instance,
Yeah.
we could see who would going to be huge or not simply because we could see because each time you logged in, they were sending emails, there were invitations and stuff. So you kind of had an idea about the traffic, and you could just at that time it's crazy because you could see who were growing by just looking at how big the invoice was, grew, and you could and if you had invested there, you would have made a lot of money.
Very interesting. That would have been a very interesting strategy to just, to tie a venture capital fund onto the side of an email delivery company. I'm going to take that idea. I'm going to take that idea. Um,
I'm not sure it will work now because email is not. It's more of a niche channel now.
yeah, yeah,
It's not. It's still important, but but you have notifications by mobile. You have login that's happens through Google and all that. So you don't. It's not as. It's not the same.
yeah, yeah. You transitioned somehow over to Silicon Valley and ended up at Y Combinator. So how did you make the move from France to Silicon Valley? What prompted you to cross the ocean?
So I sold Christian, and I was like, "What am I?" So I did a couple of other things, but in France, there is. So I have a problem with how French people work. Not in the sense that I have bad work ethic or anything, really, because they want to stay, they want to work with you long term. So it's like you have this concept where it's like lifetime. It's not lifetime employment, but it's almost that. So you have that plus the classist view, meaning people don't really mix. They'll hate me for saying that, but they really don't mix. Like I can at them, and they'll be like, "No, we don't know those people." It was hard to grow past a certain stage because once you're a startup, you really don't know who you're hiring because you don't know what you're doing. So you cannot hire the right person, which means that you have to let go a lot of people. And in France, it's always dramatic when you do that because it's really painful for everybody, like for the employee, which is normal because it's not the system. So if you let go at a company, this is a big deal. It's a big deal everywhere, but it's a huge deal here. Like you can really have trouble, and it's hard because it's hard to find a job. So and if you're let go, it's highly suspect. It's kind of like I would say in the US, if you're let go from 5 companies after staying 2 months, or 3 companies in a row after staying 2 months, one like that, or it's kind of too much already in France. So it's a huge deal. And the problem is not their fault in France. It's literally because you don't know who you're hiring. Because again, you don't know who you need. And even if you have someone that's good, it doesn't mean this person is going to be good in a year because the company will have evolved. So I really felt bad about that. Like literally, I didn't like to doing that because I felt disingenuous towards employee because you couldn't really afford. Because again, you were saying, yeah, you'll have a job in 5 years. I literally have no clue, and that's what they want. And because I felt this was disingenuous, and that's also what they need, and that's what the system wants. So I felt I was kind of going counter current because of that, and I felt bad about that, literally, because I was like, yeah. They want that. I'm not able to provide, and I don't want to lie. So how do I reconcile that? Moving to the US is basically it was basically an answer because especially in Silicon Valley, people understand that and they're looking for it. There is an upside that they don't have in France. Like if you do something good, even if the company fell, you'll have a better job out of it, provided that the companies deliver some innovative things that are interesting and all that. In France, I would have failed. I would have been all homeless
Right.
because and that's the other. That's also the last point. I tried to find a job in France, and I couldn't.
Right.
I don't have a profile that people didn't want to hire me as a full-time employee or at a little bit more than minimum wage. And I didn't know if I wanted to create another business. So there were 2 reasons mostly.
Wow. Okay. So
So
you moved to Silicon Valley and you signed up for Y Combinator. Now Y Combinator requires you to have a really good idea. Like you have to pitch them, you have to actually get accepted. So is that the idea for Inbox Booster that you pitched to Y Combinator?
no, I pitched them another idea to which we're still working on, but it doesn't require you to have a really good idea because they have no clue what a really good idea is. and they don't care. What it requires you to is be good at pitching, which you mentioned, and what it requires you is this have a thesis that you're able to articulate
Right,
in
right,
10
right.
seconds because they have short attention span
Yeah.
because I don't know why, but they have very short attention span. And so you need to explain them in 10 seconds and why this could be huge. So this is what you need. So for instance, I cure HIV. This would be huge. The how do you do that? Then they might, oh, how do you do that? And then
Yeah.
if you have a thesis as to why you can do it, that
Right.
makes sense. But cancer will be making more money than HIV because people
Right.
with cancer have more money than people with HIV. So this is literally how they think.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
So you need to have that thesis ready, and that works, and that's really what they want. So, and then they're looking for a little bit of business acumen. That's how you say. I think like you know what you're doing. You've done it a little bit before, and that's kind of it. But the reason here, and this is because I thought a lot about it, and the reason I think it's working is because you being able to pitch them is a good correlation with you going be able to pitch VCs, which means that you can raise funding, which means you can deliver on your vision. And if and they're aiming for one or two or three right out of 400. So so they don't. I think they can almost be random at this point, and they just so they need to. They have a marketing arm that's really good, where they actually hire, they attract everybody, like all the best founders, and that's kind
Right.
of I think
Right.
where they want to be. And then I think there is a kind of a ritual about how they hire you and they find you and so on. But my guess is they throw dice and they decide. I mean, I'm pretty sure they will have same results. I'm not once they interview. I'm pretty sure they kind of do a cutoff if they kind of are able to talk well enough, and then they throw dice or yes or no, and that's probably good enough. It's a statistical model, so it's so that's why. And so getting in is, in other words, it's the way I would describe it is pure luck.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Got it. And so you let's move on to look at Inbox Booster. So Inbox Booster, you've been building for a while now, and you talk about having some technology that was trained on a data set of 100 million emails. But before we talk about the tech, can you explain what problem Inbox Booster solves for
So
customers?
So I'll give you an example with mail channels. So say you have a WordPress account, you want to send an email. The email is going to be called by your filter. You're the user. What do you do? That's what we fix.
I mean, yeah, great. Like I'm immediately thinking, the average person has no idea what they're supposed to do about that. Just file a support ticket, maybe.
Yeah, that's what they would do. But that's
Yeah.
so. But now, if you're so now the problem with Google is you can file a support ticket; they're not going to answer you. So that's what we do. And the problem here is spam filters have false positive spam, and they also have real positive. So the problem here is the average person doesn't know if it's actually a problem on your side or on their side. So
Right.
we're telling you that for free, and that's already huge. And then if it's on your side, you being the user, not being the spam filter, we're telling you how to fix it and where it's coming from and what you need to do, which would be in the case of a mail channel, probably a secure WordPress account, well,
Yeah.
also your WordPress installation. But in the case of a lot of our customers are a little bit more skilled, and it's going to be more, oh, I've had an attack, how do I fix it? Or,
Right.
or afterward, everything's going to spam because my account was compromised. How do I fix it? So this is this type of discussion or help that we're going to do to have, and also we're helping fix the false positive on the spam filter side. That happens
cool.
also, and there is so spam filters announce 1 out of 1,000, so 1% of false positive. Our experience is more like 10%.
Right.
Which is, and the truth is probably in between, because we obviously see we have a bias on more people like that, and you have a tendency to overcount it, because if you were able to count it, then they wouldn't be false positive. So
It's always it's a false positive in the eye of the beholder, right? And
Yeah.
so depending on who you are.
No, no, no. Here, no, no. Here, it's literally like I remember we had a couple of weeks ago. We had a customer from YC, and they were sending one of the YC batch company, and they were sending a transactional email, and they had a sentence at the end of their sign up email that were sending them in spam, and literally this was like this email was received in Europe, please ignore it, or it was something around that. And this was putting them in spam
Huh.
at Google. So
Interesting.
this is literally a false positive.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. So
So
you basically just determined what it was that was causing them
yeah,
to go into the junk folder
yes,
and
automatically, and we're telling them
right.
that sentence, remove it, you're in inbox.
Yeah.
And the problem here is because it's spam filter and their statistical system and ML based system.
Hmm.
If once we tell them, they're like, yeah, then you need to keep paying us for a couple of weeks. So we're sure that it's not another problem because there could be
Right.
another problem behind it.
Right.
So we need to, and then we'll see if it's a combination or not, and then you should be fine. But we're
Right.
really doing that work of explaining. But that's on the one hand, so that's typically a false positive. This happens, yeah, it's a sort of our business, so it's actually probably more. So it happens a lot, and there is also people with reputation issue, meaning that their past history has been bad, but because they have no tooling, they have no clue what really they've been doing wrong. So we explain them to them, and they're kind of fix it, and it's good, and that works. And then we have a little bit of customers who are trying to kind of play at the limit of like what they're allowed to do, and that's probably like maybe 5% of the customer base. So they use us for monitoring and fixing when it happens. But it's and there are a lot of other customers we don't take, which are the ones who are actively trying to
Yeah.
deceive the spam filters. But that doesn't work because we're just really because we tried working with them and they're like, oh yeah, I'm sending crap and that's why it's in spam. Can you do anything about it? And I'm like, yes, stop sending it. So,
Yeah, yeah. And like I think certainly anytime we get inquiries from all kinds of companies that want to send email. They don't like our product is designed for web hosting providers. And so if we get an inquiry from a web hosting provider, it's great, no problem. But we also get inquiries from just anybody, like a casino in Brazil that wants to send mail. And we've tried taking those customers as an experiment, but it never goes well. Companies that just don't get it and are just looking for a way to send out low quality email are going to have poor results everywhere they go. And at the end of the day, they're really unreliable at paying you, even if they do stick around. So we've learned to be very selective about the customers that we add to the platform. I guess you could have a different kind of email sending service that has a different message where you'll just take anybody and hope for the best, but that's not the kind of service that we have, and it sounds like yours as well is not for that kind of customer.
so it's not working. It's not even. It's just simply not working for them. So it's really not useful because our customers is really. Yeah, it's like a startup founders. They don't care about email. They want to sign up email. They want it to work. It's not working. What do they do? Or it's you know, or it's I'm a marketing person. I have a VP. I have no clue how email works. It's in spam. What do I do? How do I fix it? And I don't really care. I just want it to work. But we're not like competing with deliverability consultants and all that because sometimes customers go see us for that, but that's not what we do because we're not going to. It's a tool. It's not. It's a tool and it's an instrument telling you why you're in spam, but it's not telling you how to deceive the spam filter, or it's not really going to kind of take your hand and say this is how you should deal with life cycle and all that. So we do explain, we do have guides and all that, but we're not doing that. So it's more it's really the reasoning behind it is really like email is important. If you think about it, email is there's something beautiful about it that no other platform has replicated, like communication platform has replicated so far. Everybody can open a network, can open a server, everybody can send email, and everybody has an email account, at least in the Occidental world. So there is and even and in China they don't, but that's kind of the only place where they don't, and they have reasons for that. and it's owned by no one. So that's kind of collective common that needs to be maintained and needs to be yeah, recognized. So the second thing on that is it's replaced. So that's more like from a kind of technical point of view. From a non-technical point of view, it's simply replacing your mailbox, like a physical mailbox. Everything now is by email. So you start to have really, and in your physical mailbox, you have junk email, you have sometimes postcards, and you have really important things like invoices, tax, and stuff like that. And that's roughly, or business proposals and stuff like that. So that's really what you're kind of having on your mailbox. So it's not disappearing, but it's changing, it's evolving. And um, and that means, and because right now everything is very heavily centralized around Google and Outlook, you have, and they don't care. So they care about Samsung. They care for instance, we had used to have as a customer Match.com, a subsidiary in France, and they were in spam, I think, on Google. And one guy from my team at Critson worked at Google, and like, yeah, I asked them to call their Google Ads representative. They'll fix it, which they did.
Seriously.
Yeah.
The AdWords guy could fix an email problem.
He opened a ticket. I don't know what they did, but this fixed the problem.
That's amazing. Oh my
Samsung
God.
has the same type of agreement with Google.
Right.
We on the Inbox Booster lost one customer for the same type of reason. So basically, this is fixed for this is roughly a fixed problem for big companies, either through personal relationships.
Yeah.
By the way, they still go into promotion. They don't. They
Yeah.
just don't hit the junk folder. But this is fixed for this type of companies, for big companies, or they can hire a consultant that will tell them what to do and all that. So this is a problem that's really fixed for large corporations. It's kind of a
right.
cottage industry, and they don't have really problems. Now, if you're a restaurant and you want to send a newsletter to your customers, this is you don't have no clue how to do it, and this is not fixed. And this is very unfair because you could pay someone $24,000 per year to fix it. But if you're a small business owner, you're never going to do that. So this is really unfair. So that's what we're trying to fix. But, because
Wow.
you're in this kind of uneven system where the big corporations, which are already big, which have already a lot of advantages, are not able to compete on email. And that's kind of the best thing you can do. It's like free. You can do it without, you don't need to pay Google, you don't need to pay Meta, you don't need to pay anybody. You can just send an emails to your customers or your users. And the fact that it's not as easy as before, I understand. The fact that those companies don't want to invest in tools to make it easy for those people, I understand because they don't care. But that's our opportunity, and that's what we're trying to. That's what we're after. So we're not really after big, large corporations or web hosting companies. We're really after restaurants, car mechanics, or those are really or small startup founders. Those are really our customers.
I have an off the wall question that it wasn't in the set of questions that I sent you before our interview. I'm really interested to hear what you think of the new Y Combinator startup called Resend. This is a brand new transactional email service.
Yeah, there are customers. So,
Right. Okay. Interesting. Why? You obviously know the transactional space. You ran one of the first transactional email sending services even before SendGrid. You've been in this space for a long time. What's their pitch? Why did they start yet another transactional company?
that you'll have to ask them, but I'll actually give you something that you remember Mailjet as a company. So the
Absolutely.
Mailjet CEO
Yeah.
told me, remember, so he's French, and he told me something which I can talk about because it's been a long time. Very insightful. He was like, "Yeah, we've built MGML, which is like their tooling for building marketing email,
Right.
and that's how we got acquired. That's why we got acquired." So my point being that the front end, so my point being that being able to code email is actually very valuable. It doesn't mean you're not going to monetize that directly, but if you have a framework that allows you to write good email for developers, for website developers, it's valuable. And they're going to use your tooling. They're going to use your email delivery system because of it, because it's kind of good enough and it's integrated and it's easy. And they want to help you because they want you to improve your framework.
Huh. So really, it's an email authoring platform bolted onto a transactional service that just kind of they had to have.
Yes, but in code. Understand that it's a
Included.
free
Right, right,
module.
right,
It's
right.
because it's really it's like a React module. So
Right, 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 right,
for
right.
developers, it's kind of a no-brainer to use, and
Yeah.
it's make it really easy. And it's the same thing, the same spiel as everybody, which is really you tried you wait for those companies to grow, and one of them will get big, and because of that, you'll make a lot of money, and then
Yeah.
you'll lose them because they'll put you they'll write an RFP and they'll have more complex needs and all that. But
Yeah.
you can grow with that. Now the question you're asking is, will they become huge? That I don't.
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier why Combinator, kind of rolls the dice 400 times per year, and they expect two or three to go big, and the rest, who knows, right?
Yeah, they're not just they don't give me their numbers, but
Yeah.
I don't think they care. So the thing here in Silicon Valley is they give you 100K, but 100K is not for them a lot of money. It's like pocket money,
Yeah.
literally, because those people are uber rich, like they're like private jet type of rich, so they don't care. And so for them, it's like a bet, and it's like it doesn't mean they didn't think about it. It doesn't mean they think, but there is behind the super rich there is humility, and this
Mm,
humility is I have no clue.
mm,
So they're smart. These people who are dedicating 2 years of this life to building this business, they know more than me, and if they don't, then I definitely should not invest there because they're
mm.
supposed to know more than me in their business than me. So I will have no way to tell if I don't really have any good way to tell if this company is going to work out or not, simply because they know more than me. So if they think that, so either I spend 2 years getting the same knowledge and
Right.
then I will not, or I just bet. And that's kind of where I compare it with the French VC approach, where the assumption is that the VC is smarter than the entrepreneur, and so they know better, so they'll be able to tell if a business works or not. Here, there is a lot more humility, at least from what I've seen, and they understand they don't know.
That's so
So
interesting that you say that investors in Silicon Valley are at least relatively speaking humble,
I mean, not when you
because
talk to them, but
right.
when you kind of peel behind what they're saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. But actually, come to think of it, interactions that I've had with Silicon Valley investors versus investors from other places, that would be reflected in those conversations. They just kind of assume, well, you probably know what you're doing. You're the entrepreneur. I'm just the money guy. And yet, yeah, it's not like they're stupid. They're not just like burning money for nothing. There's always a concept there. I think about Andreessen Horowitz, right? Like legendary investors. Obviously, they've had a few really big hits, but their fund, it burned a ton of money on cryptocurrency startups, many of which completely vaporized. They had this thesis they were really solidly behind about crypto, and a bunch of it was totally false. A bunch of it did not work out because the regulatory side did not go their way. Maybe it will eventually. I mean, never say never. But when AI came along, when Gen AI came along, they pivoted pretty hard into that space. Once again, kind of being humble and assuming that the people who are the PhDs in that area know what they're doing. They just put 31 million into a German company that was founded by a few of the PhDs who worked at Stability AI on Stable Diffusion, and now it's the best AI model. And Elon Musk is using that model inside of X, and there's some really interesting stuff happening because of that. But all being driven essentially by Silicon Valley money taking bets.
And but that's what's happening. Like so they understand that they don't know basically. And the other thing is, if you're an investor, you can because you're looking for huge success, there it's by definition outlier.
Mm,
So if you're able
right, right.
to capture that in statistics, then this will not work by definition.
Mm,
But if you, for instance, look at SoundGrid in our space, it was clear that would become a big company, but it was not clear that we're doing exactly the same. So that was clear. For instance, in my case, we knew that we could become a huge company. Maybe not as big as them, I don't know, but we could become bigger. But instead, I choose to optimize for our profitability. But I didn't understand that it would be that big. And that's kind of
right.
the thing they do understand is
Yes.
things could be that big. For instance,
Yeah.
Google. people understood it would be a big company.
Right.
They didn't understand it would be that big of a company.
Yes.
And we're talking about a difference between, let's say, 100 million to 100 billion. So this is the kind of, and they're really good at understanding that here. They're really, and that's really what they're after. There are, and they understand that, and a lot of things doesn't make sense. A lot of things don't make sense until you understand, until you think about they're looking for something that will be worth 100 billion.
Right.
And if you're looking at something that's worth 100 billion, losing a billion doesn't matter. That's kind of the reasoning.
Yeah.
Now losing a billion for me does matter because I don't have them. So I'm not able to make so that's kind of the reasoning. But for them, they put themselves as investors in this type of position. So their obsession is to not miss the 100 billion company, knowing that they have no clue where it would come from. Because if they knew, then it's probably not going to come from that.
Exactly.
If that makes sense, it's kind of like I want to write, let's say, a movie script. And ChatGPT is able to write it, then it's probably not going to be a break because it has to be original, but not too much. I mean, it's an outlier, and they basically look at what's ChatGPT is able to do things that are not an outlier by design.
Right. By design, it's actually like trained to not do that. It probably could, but it's trained to not do that. That's called alignment, right?
Yeah, but the reason it's not possible is because a lot of those outliers are generally bad.
Totally. Like bad quality or literally dangerous and toxic. Yeah.
So that's kind of, or it doesn't make sense and all that. So that's kind of what you're saying. So my point being that because we're talking about people the companies that don't fit the curve, then they're coming from unknown places and they're really, really hard to assess. And even of course, if your company becomes huge, it's great, but for investors, it's not a great outcome. Like, huge, meaning, say that you make 100 million sales. It's not a great depending on how much you raise, it's not a great outcome. That's kind of that's kind of the thing. It's a good outcome. Of course, it's money and all that, but that's the great outcome is really so Peter Thiel, for instance, he put in I think he put in 100K at Facebook,
right?
And he made a couple of billions. That's a great outcome. That's kind of what they're after.
That makes your entire portfolio. I remember watching a presentation a decade ago by an angel investor organization that had done a bunch of research into angel investor portfolios. And what they found is that the entire return for an angel investor's portfolio over 20 years will be generated by 1 to 2 companies that they invest in out of 50. And half of the companies completely a write-off. They'll never get anything back. And then the rest of them, there's some return, but it's very poor. It's like less than the S&P 500. But you're really counting on that random 1 or 2 out of the portfolio to deliver all of your returns. It's just a really interesting, an interesting way of making money.
And the thing is, a lot of businesses are interested in that capital because it's easier to get than bank. It's more expensive, actually. But the problem is if you want to have this model, you need to expose yourself to some risk. So say I invest in 500 coffee shops. I will never get that type of return. I will have, most of them will not fail. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I assume. But it's very, very unlikely that one of them will get huge. Simply because huge, one of them will get huge actually, but huge in that space doesn't mean the same thing. So it means there is a line in front of my shop. It doesn't mean I'm the new Starbucks.
So look, in the world of email, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you just kind of look at what's happening in the world and some things just seem obvious. Like it just seemed obvious in the early days of AWS that the hyperscalers were going to be very successful, were going to be huge. And it seemed obvious that certain SaaS companies that were starting out in the early days that you knew about would be huge one day, or at least that they had the potential to be huge.
Yeah.
So looking at the landscape right now, what has that potential to be huge? Let's say looking at the email. AI. Okay, sure. But how does AI, like, is there
Or
a
in
way
email, we
that
can talk
AI
about
works into email in particular? Like what's the future of email look like? Email gets criticized a lot, right? For, being this antiquated protocol and
so in the US, I think the government have the right to open your mail, but they have the right to open your email. That I think is so that kind of tells you kind of well, on email you'll actually have really important and personal conversation that you will not have on Signal, for instance, because it's you're not going to have this type of discussions, or they might be important, but it's kind of the overall thing. Like in email, you literally have your tax return, or you have stuff, this type of important, very confidential data. I think that's one of the axis of improvement is we're going there and we're not there totally. And the second thing is with AI, email will not grow in the sense that you're not sending more emails, but the spam problem has completely changed the dynamic of it. Uh, but I think I mean, you see it with crypto. Let me do it differently. See it with crypto. With crypto, there is a thirst for common thing like the blockchain or like the Ethereum or whatever or Bitcoin. There is a need and a desire for something that's not owned by companies. Email is doing that already. So how can you repurpose it to being able to being that layer because it's already there? And how can you make it different in the sense that it's mostly a work tool, but what you want out of it, and that's more the thing. And until a company has addressed those questions, it's not going to evolve very much. But this is kind of to me where the obvious is the AI layer of email. I actually don't believe it's that much of a big deal because I mean, for it is and it is not, but on the UI side, it is. On the actual spam filtering side, it's actually already there.
it's
So,
already there.
and it's been there. So, this is kind of incremental change because you're looking at it's before you're looking at you're kind of delegating the smartness to people, like to actual like who's clicking on spam and trying to make sense of that signal. But and you're building subgroups of people so you could map them and so on. Instead, you can ask your LLM for that, but you still need to fine tune it and you still need to feed it with signals. So it's not that big of a difference. And you could actually look inside the email and understand it, but the problem is it's too costly, so you still have the same problem because it takes too much processing power, which is exactly the problem of before because it could still do that and then you don't for cost reasons. So it's not changing significantly the deal. Now you can auto reply. Okay, but how is that different from not replying? Uh, so, so I'm not sure it's a huge differentiator as it's announced as much because it's actually a lot more. In this sense, this thing is ahead, and you can see it on our side because. For instance, with Inbox Booster, what we're trying to do is what we're doing is we're understanding the spam filter. So it's a new field in AI called AI interpretability.
Right.
There has but this is literally what we're charging our customers for. Literally,
Right.
this is we're charging them to explain what an AI, what decision an AI, why they have an AI has taken these decisions about them, and turning that type of neural weight and biases decision into something they can understand. So this is literally what we're charging our customers for.
Yeah, because at Google, I mean, Google's been using a neural network model for about 10 years within Gmail, as far as I understand it. Uh, Obviously, the models they're using now are probably pretty powerful. And yeah, they're probably not LLMs because that would be too expensive. But they are really sophisticated, really well fine-tuned models operating at tremendous scale. And so, in order to beat the filter, you kind of have to mount some kind of adversarial attack against it to see what gets through. I mean, is that kind of how Inbox Booster works? Do you
Oh
sort of try
yeah, and
different
how?
messages?
Yeah, basically that's how it's working, and
Yeah.
that's how it's working.
Hmm.
It's in a patent, so you can read it up.
Oh,
But
cool.
that's basically how we've explained.
Huh.
But it's exactly that we're mounting some automatically adversarial attack to
Hmm.
figure out what's working. But this is easy to go around. It's not really the point. The hard part is to figure out to make it actionable for a human being. which is what why I mentioned it, because it's the same thing as in the AI. It's easy to mount an adversarial attack. What's hard is to get to interpret it for a human being.
Right, right, right.
And then there are ethical concerns, which is exactly what we have. But then we figure out that it's not working for spammers, so it's not really helpful.
Right,
So
right.
but that's exactly what we're doing. And so, but my point is, this is an active research area, and we're already making money from that thing that's being researched. So to do that in email, that tells that email is the more cutting edge than people believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
I think also, I mean, certainly from public announcements, it does sound like Resend as a startup, as a Y Combinator startup, is doing well. Like they are, I think they wrote that they have something like 1,000 or 2,000 paying customers. After
yeah,
one
we're
year
talking about
from,
really small customers. So
sure,
it's
they
not,
could be really small customers, but nonetheless, uh, given the hypothesis that to make email really useful for developers, you have to make it easy for them to build the emails as a React template. Uh, Having that tells me that there's still a lot of interest in keeping email going and a lot of value from working with email.
you have to. I mean, it's not. It's kind of like.
Right.
It's just that before it used to be. If you ask like the future in general, like from a business point of view, no, it is important. It's not. It's just that it moved from the hot area at some point where it's like cool and all that to. It's important, but it's kind of muddled.
Yeah.
So so there is space for incremental innovation. There might be space for radical reinvention. Uh, but not at the standard side, more on the client side, I would say. And that you can see also with Superhuman and people like that. And you can see
Right.
also that, so for instance, we open source an MTA relay that's doing the same as Resend and all that, and nobody's using it. And one of the reasons they don't use it is because they're afraid that you need to do some very specific magical trick to make it work. Like to make it work on, so Gmail received your email.
Yeah.
And they asked us how did we, it's in production with one customer, it's sending a couple of million email per month. And they were like, oh yeah, but what magical step did you follow it to plug it in? And they're like, yeah, we just launched it and then we send email. Oh, really? You need to do more? I'm like, no.
So you wrote an MTA and
My
just
co-founder
open
wrote
sourced
yeah.
it.
My
Really
co-founder, yeah.
interesting. I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah,
Uh,
but it was really to test the hypothesis that so one of our thing we're thinking a lot about is the email is becoming very concentrated as a network,
yeah.
and it's actually bad, and that's one of the reasons email is becoming not as good as it used to be. So you need to decentralize it, and there is literally no reason why it's not, except like no technical reasons, because technically speaking, before the reason Christian existed and other companies like that is because of the static IP thing. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you needed a static IP to manage reputation. Now the reputation is tied to the domain. So it literally doesn't matter which IP is sending the email. We're still in between, but it's not. But the point is, you could send your email from your anywhere, and it will work. So that's what we're. So we're trying to re-decentralize, and we're thinking of how to do that. So you could have more. So you don't need to centralize it again, because there is no reason, literally. Like it's just. I think it's making the network, the email network, very vulnerable. It's also bad because you really don't want one company to own this type of things, and it's just and also it's kind of stifying diversity, because you could have different. I mean, for instance, if you want to send email to Google, you have to use, for people doing cold email. They're using Google accounts for that, so they can hide their thing, but they should be able to do it themselves without trouble. And you can see there is a company called Mailforge who are doing that now. They're just so they have their own SMTP relay to send spam. Sorry, cold email. It's kind of a good thing in a sense, because now also, because spam filters also are really good, and you know that, so they're able to catch all of that. So it's not so there's really no reason why it's centralized and ossified like that.
Yeah. I have to say, it's one of the things that's really kind of sad about the email space is that concentration. Years ago, at the MOG conference, it was a lively place. There were so many different companies participating, many different receivers. There were a lot of different spam filtering providers. But in the last few years, not to disparage the organization at all, it's a great organization. The conference itself has become less lively because there's really only two receivers that matter, Google and Microsoft. And so at the conference, a lot of attention is paid on them specifically. Like, here's what you need to do to deal with Microsoft's new requirements or Google's new requirements. And everybody's very interested in that. And then the product manager at Google, everybody wants to sit with that guy at lunchtime to pick their brains and try to figure out any kind of secret way that they might be able to get past the filters, obviously. To which the answer is always, there's nothing you can do. I don't even know anything. Please just go drink your Coke somewhere else. But it's sort of unfortunate to see that centralization of mailboxes, and I don't see any way that that's really going to turn around. But maybe there's some startup idea that could once again decentralize email. Now that, as you mentioned, now that domain reputation is far more important than IP reputation, maybe there's a way. I don't know.
So that's one thing we're working on.
Yeah.
We start to have early stage prototypes. It's a little bit too early, but we see solution. We hope to find solutions to that. That's one thing we think.
Yeah.
What's important is with the crypto movement. You've seen that there is a good market demand for that. Also Proton. So there is a market demand for that. So now it's just about building the capacity.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, it's good to see. It's good to see Proton doing so well. The last time I looked, I think they had like 400 or 500 employees. They're clearly making a lot of money. They send ever increasing amounts of email. I think that they have their own abuse problems because of the way they operate, because they don't retain records and everything is encrypted, and their operating jurisdiction means they can't really cooperate with law enforcement. There's some definite problems.
That's not
okay.
true. No, that's not true. They do cooperate.
Okay.
The law enforcement.
Okay, there you go.
I've seen that in France. So because in France they sued, they asked the Swiss government to give them a record, and Proton gives the record.
Right.
They have the right. It's mandatory.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Proton isn't as safe as people think it is to operate a drug cartel from, or whatever.
Not sure what's safe to be. I would not know that.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, it's been fabulous talking with you, Nicolas, but we're out of time. Thank you for your unique perspective on the dynamics that are shaping the world of email. And I look forward to seeing what comes out of Inbox Booster in the coming months and years. It certainly seems like you have found a really a great niche and a really key need that so many companies have. Getting past that mysterious AI spam filter.
Thank you for having me.